Hello, today HeartBridge Collective welcomes Martha Bowman. Martha, it is great for you to take time and join us today. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a licensed mental health counselor and a licensed addictions counselor, LCAC, licensed clinical addictions counselor. I am also certified in EMDR, a specialized kind of therapy for trauma and anxiety and like PTSD. I am a therapist and manager for a local mental health center in a small county in Indiana, southern Indiana. And I've been in this county for about 5 years, and I've worked as a therapist 16, 18 years, something like that. Got my master's degree at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, and I got my undergrad at Lyon College in Batesville, Arkansas. And my journalism and music degree really did help with when I transitioned into mental health counseling, because you got to ask all those good open-ended questions and yeah, all that. So I've also been trained as a music therapist, and
I love that.
Singer-songwriter kind of things, and I make my own jewelry and do a lot of art, and I do a lot of creative things. So it's a nice blending of the mental health field. You kind of need that when you work in the mental health field because it can be stressful.
Absolutely. And I do believe you do art therapy also, don't you?
Yes.
With clients.
Yeah. Kind of it's like we'd call it art interventions, because I'm not licensed as an art therapist, but I do therapy and I do art in therapy. How about that?
That's beautiful. I can certainly see how that would work. That would change the dynamic and
Absolutely.
relaxation. So today I would like to start off by talking a little bit about ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. If you're comfortable starting with that, would you define that for us and
Sure.
give us some details about what all
Yeah.
that?
So ACES is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale, and it was developed to kind of help weed out what trauma is for people who don't even realize they've been traumatized. There are people who are like, no, I was never traumatized. And then you give them the ACEs. It's 10 plus questions. There's some that are like 2-part. And it really gives very specific examples of, did this ever happen to you? And then they go, yes, that happened. Yes, that happened. Yes, that happened. And then it's like, these could be considered traumas. But because if it's normalized in their childhood culture, they would say, well, yeah, I got my butt whooped just like everybody else did, you know? Oh yeah, sometimes left marks, but I deserved it. I was a bad kid or whatever, you know, they kind of, and they've been taught that way since they were children. So when we're doing intakes and we're asking, you know, do you have any trauma you want to talk about? There are people who will come in who have had extensive trauma and they're like, nope, no trauma. Now, sometimes they're referred by probation to us, so they don't want to talk about it. They just want to get their requirements done and get back out. But I've had other people who are self-referred. They want to come to counseling. And I had one it's been a couple of years ago. We had been meeting for 3 years. And then she started talking about a childhood trauma as if I should know about it. And I had to, you know, just play along like, oh yeah. And I was kind of like asking questions, trying to figure out what in the world is she talking about. And she had like severe trauma from ages like 4 to 16, like sexual trauma. And so she left, and then I went and looked in her chart, and I was like, I looked at her intake, and trauma, none reported. It took finally 3 years for her to get comfortable enough to talk to me about it, which I thought was very interesting. But if the intake therapist just says, do you have any traumas? Do you have a trauma history? A lot of people are going to say, no, I don't have a trauma history. No, I'm fine. I turned out fine. My parents beat me and I turned out fine, you know. So we hear that a lot. So the scale just really specifies certain circumstances that when they answer yes, then you get a score. And the research, if you look up ACEs, there's like a lot of people have four things from that out of 10, you know, and a lot of people will say, no, I don't have trauma. And then they have, you know, 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. And sometimes when I'm doing it, because there's a two-part, like question number one is two-part. So if they answer yes to both of those, I give them 2 points because that's, anyway, and I can show that to you if you want.
That would be great.
Show you what the ACES looks like. Why did it move? There it is. Okay. So you can see that. Let me close that out. Okay. So this is your basic PDF of the ACE score, the questionnaire. So it's asking specifically while you were growing up during your first 18 years of life. So you might come across somebody who's had traumas later, might have experienced something really violent or scary or whatever. This is really just for the first 18 years of life. Did a parent or adult swear at you, insult you, put you down, humiliate you? And then second part, act in a way that made you afraid you'd be physically hurt. To me, those are 2 different questions. So
yes,
they say yes to both. I put 2.
Absolutely.
Did a parent or other adult push, grab, slap you, or throw something at you, hit you so hard to leave marks? So somebody could have thrown things at you or thrown in your general direction enough to terrify you, but maybe they never left marks. You still get a 1 on that.
Yes.
And then it talks about sexual abuse. Did anybody, an adult or someone 5 years older than you? So a lot of times kids will be molested by someone who's 5 or 6 or 7 older cousin, or, and they were like, well, that, they get, when perpetrators are really good, the kids feel like they've given consent. And so they're like, I couldn't complain about that because, and sex is so taboo that if the perpetrators are really skilled, then it's pleasurable for the child, which is so confusing. And I don't know if you know this, but when children are sexually abused, when they're molested, the hormones, the adolescent hormones kick in early.
No, I had no idea.
So think about it. Then they've been molested, but then nobody knows because you're not allowed to tell, because the person, if it's a good perpetrator, they're threatening the child. These terrible things will happen. And so they don't tell anybody, but then they're sexually acting out and then they get in trouble for it. And then by the time they are 10, 11, 12, 13, they're sexually active, which is also they're punished for, but it's all from these other traumas that had not been addressed that caused the hormones to activate early. So it asks very specific questions about sexual abuse, which a lot of times people don't want to ask these things, right?
Right. And, I have often thought that the perpetrator knows how to choose the child.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think sometimes people overlook that part. They're not going to probably go after a loud, boisterous, I'm telling you everything I know kind of kid. They're going to select often.
Right. Yeah. So, and some perpetrators also like the thrill of the chase. So they're going to spend time grooming. So if you do have that boisterous child, they're going to figure out how to tame that boisterous child. I mean, it is, and it's like this really sick game for people in a way. Anyway, so then, look at number 4. Did you often feel? So there is often so if you every once in a while felt like nobody loved you, like if you were the little kid who's put the little stick and the little bandana on you, took your stuff and you were going to run away, but was that often? Did you often feel like no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? So this is really common, really common. Did you feel like your family didn't look out for each other and support each other? Also very common. Again, here's 2 parts, right? That could be a couple of points. And then here's just sort of that neglect part here. You didn't have enough to eat, or you had to wear dirty clothes, or that no one was there to protect you. I usually use this right here as an or, because if they would feed you and you would have clothes, but they didn't really protect you, that's a point. And then just really point blank, were your parents too drunk or high to take care of you? Or take you to the doctor? There's lots of neglect that way that can be very traumatizing. If you have an injury as a child, a physical injury as a child that's never taken care of, that's going to hit you when you hit 30 or 40.
Oh, yes.
You're going to have those problems. 6 is very simple. Were your parents separated or divorced? Hello, a lot of people are going to answer that, right?
A lot of people.
Yeah. And then this is interesting. Was your mother or stepmother often pushed, slapped, grabbed, those kind of, like all this physical stuff, repeatedly hit, threatened with a gun or knife? Lots of options for questions there, and lots of different forms of violence. And it's the mother. Now, honestly, if you were going to be really thorough, you would turn it around. Did any adult in your family get pushed, grabbed? Because it could be a much older sibling, or it could be the father.
Absolutely.
It's not just women being physically abused.
Right.
Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or used street drugs? So that's going to be a lot of people. If alcohol caused a problem with your dad or your mom, that you'd get a 1 there. And then look at this. Was a household member while you were growing up depressed or mentally ill? Or did a household member attempt suicide? Just attempt. So I work with people who's had a parent who did commit suicide, and then think about, so this is not even on here, but when he's 4 and he comes down and his dad has killed himself, you have the trauma of the suicide and the aftermath and so that's a lot of trauma.
That is a lot.
Yeah. And then did a household member go to prison? So, and we have a pretty good amount of people in our prison system. It does say prison, not jail, but I would think you could probably put jail in there too, because just going to jail. So down here's your ACES score. When you add that in there, how many out of 10, So I would say there'd be people who could have 12 or 14 out of 10, could be really, really big.
Absolutely. So. In your experience, do you see the numbers rising for the totals on this?
That would be hard to answer because now, so we're recording it more and we're recording it better. So I would say this abuse is whatever we're having now has been going on since humans roamed the earth. I think, you read about molesting in the Bible. You read about, murders and all, so humans have been horrible to humans since time began, but now we're recording it and we're acknowledging that this is not okay and that it's traumatizing. And then we can figure out, how do we help you through this? Before, I think even just in the last century, it was like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
Crying's not going to bring him back. Crying's not going to undo this, And so, just move on.
Don't talk about it.
Don't talk about it.
You don't, for a myriad of reasons, don't talk about it.
Right. And the abusive parents of these now adult children, they're saying, well, I'm not doing it now, so you need to just get over it. Not making amends, not doing it. So that doesn't make it easier. Just saying.
We have seen recently, it seems like, as the ACEs would detail, that these things are coming out, like middle-aged women are suddenly saying, we've had a whole batch of women say, you know what, I just figured out my mother was a narcissist. So the latent...
There's so much more information out now. You can just Google what's a narcissist. Google. Now, that's not to say it's always accurate. So sometimes they'll put conversational paragraphs in there about what a narcissist is or what borderline personality is. And you really need to go to the DSM
get
the criteria. As you see, all my little things, the tabs of places that I go frequently. And what are all the symptoms of actual, like, being diagnosed with depression? Because there's 9 things that you have to meet the criteria for 5 or 6 of those. And for anxiety, you have to meet, there's a certain number. We do certain scales for that. So I think we're just getting better at recognizing it, recording it, and trying to help people. And saying, no, you can't beat your kids. It's
and bringing education, as you said, starting to educate about it.
Yes.
Is how we can start to break this cycle. We do have to talk about it.
Yes, we do.
We do have to provide resources. We have to make ourselves available.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So the grant that we got that's based on this whole ACES scale is going, one of the main things we're doing in addition to connecting people in jail with resources and connecting people who are on probation with mental health services and all those kind of things. It's education in the whole community. What is an adverse child experience and how does it affect people long term? And do you know if your children have had them? Do you know if the kids in your classroom have had them? Do you know if the person you just pulled over, for speeding has, and not that you're going to do the ACEs while you're giving a speeding ticket, but if officers, probation officers, DCS workers, teachers, principals, daycare providers, parents, if they all can understand ACEs, they understand that adverse childhood experiences will negatively affect adults, then they're going to work on how can we eliminate these adverse childhood experiences now so that these children can grow up and be healthier and happier as adults.
What a beautiful world that would be.
Yes.
I really think we're heading there. I feel we are moving that direction.
I know.
And that's very exciting.
Yes, it is. It is.
I know you have worked with numerous people that have had high ACEs scores. What did you see in their health, later on in life?
Oh my gosh. Not even later on. I see people in their 20s with fibromyalgia, and that is really closely related to stress. And so distress, constant distress, is hard on all your systems. It's hard on your heart. It's hard on your respiration. It's hard on your skin. It's hard on your brain. It's hard on your muscles. Everything, when you clench up your whole body, it's going to hurt. When you are tense all the time, you're going to be in pain. And so even if stress doesn't cause fibromyalgia, it brings it to the surface and makes it so much worse. But also heart disease, obesity. I mean, when you think about a depressed person, depression is a downward spiral. You're depressed, so you don't exercise and you just eat and you don't do anything. And so you get heavier, and then you get more depressed because you're heavy. So you eat more because you're depressed, and downward spiral. It's like, and then obesity causes all, the heart disease, cancer, all these things. It is an impact for those diseases. So when you think about being completely immobilized with fear and anxiety, that's going to at least cause gastrointestinal problems.
Absolutely.
Every single person I've ever met with irritable bowel syndrome, they all have anxiety. All of them. I've never met one person with irritable bowel syndrome who doesn't have anxiety. And there's the chicken or egg thing here, right? Because do they have IBS because they're anxious, or are they anxious because the IBS feels like anxiety? So if you ever have like a little stomach ache, you might mistaken that for anxiety, right? Because
absolutely. Yeah. I'm just nervous.
Yeah. And so I had that experience in grad school, actually. I was at a school at Ball State, and there was a Starbucks, and I was drinking like way more coffee than I was used to. And I was used to drinking half calf at home, but I was having this full leaded, and then my stomach started hurting, and I was getting diarrhea, and I was like, everything I ate kind of hurt my stomach, and I was getting little canker sores inside my mouth. So I talked to a woman at a holistic pharmacy, and she said, oh, well, if you have those, then you have little ulcers too. And it's probably because, you're the food. And I was like, well, I have been drinking a lot of caffeine. She goes, yeah, that will deplete the good flora in your stomach. But I had this feeling like, what's wrong? Wrong, because a stomach ache is usually paired with anxiety, especially for anxious people. And I'm not a naturally anxious person. I'm high energy, but I don't have like fears all the time. Like people I work with, the clients I work with who have chronic anxiety, they have stomach aches all the time. But we have this pairing idea that clenching in your gut is anxiety. So then they get anxious about what's going to happen, and they freak out. And then they're truly anxious because they're worried about what's going to happen. Or get this. So this is another one of these spirals, but anxiety goes up. They're worried that they're going to have another panic attack. And the worry causes the panic attack. So you've got this upward spiral of this high vibration of anxiety, and they're like, even just test anxiety, they're worried they're not going to do well on the test. So they're not going to do well on the test because they're anxious. And when we're anxious, our brains shut down. the amygdala in the back of the brain sends that cortisol to the front of the brain, and the brain's like, you're going to die, get out of here. And so the fearful thought, the amygdala is the reptilian part of the brain. It's not smart. And so it just interprets fear as fear. So fear could be, I'm about to get hit by a train, or fear could be, I'm going to say something stupid. Amygdala processes the information exactly the same, sends the signal to the front of the brain that says, get out of here or fight this aggressor off, you know? So when you have people who something triggers their anxiety and they yell at you, you know, that's the fight response, fight or flight, you know, or they're like, gotta go. And they're out, you know, and it's just something that seems like it came out of nowhere. People say that all the time. Well, it just came out of nowhere. No, it didn't.
Right.
There's always somewhere it came. And I tell my clients, we can think 70,000 thoughts a day. We can speak 16,000 words a day. So when you think about how fast our thoughts go on this conveyor belt through our brain, zoom, zoom, they're gone. When we have a fearful thought, the amygdala starts to pick that up. Then we're thinking about something else, but what's left is that body sensation. So when we have a fight or flight, our chest gets, you know, our muscles constrict, including our chest. Our heart rate goes faster. Our respiration goes faster. We get tingly in our hands, or they get sweaty. We get flush. Then we get dizzy because the blood flow has suddenly changed. And, you know, and then we're freaking out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you think about just being able to recognize, okay, there was some, I just had some thought, let's pull it back. What was, you know, and you do that, right? You'll be like,
oh, I do.
About this. And then you lily pad back to, well, before that, I was thinking about that, before that. And so you get at least to the point where, oh, I was just thinking maybe that person doesn't like me, or maybe I'm going to flunk my test, or whatever the fearful thought was, that then you have 50 million other things that are going through our brains, you know, all the time. And so we come back to that and go, okay, that's a fearful thought. I recognize it as a fearful thought, but I'm not going to die.
Right.
Take a deep breath. I'm safe. My body is going through a false alarm because the amygdala was saying you're going to die, right? And then you have to try to get your brain back online. So a lot of times when people have the fight response or the flight, I guess, either one, they go for a walk. They're mad. They're going to go for a walk. They're upset. That's bilateral stimulation. Bilateral stimulation stimulates both sides of the brain.
Wow.
Yeah. So bi meaning two, lateral meaning back and forth. Any kind of bilateral stimulation, drumming, guitar, piano, walking, running, basketball, that's all bilateral stimulation, which is why a walk feels so good. We clear our mind because our bodies are working, and then we're getting our brain that was shut off from the amygdala. The amygdala is like, you're going to die. So the brain shuts off and the instincts take over. The heart rate increases, all that stuff, right? But we go and walk. So when I do a lot of EMDR, I do a lot of tapping, and people on Zoom can do like self-tapping. You just breathe for a second, just breathe and let your brain come back online. And then you go, okay, that was just this thing. I'm not going to die. I'm safe. We have to make sure you're safe. Like, don't say I'm safe if somebody's coming after you. That's when you need your fight or flight. If somebody is chasing you, or you're about to get hit by a runaway car, that fight or flight activates. And it's going to activate no matter how much you can lower your overall anxiety. And we measure anxiety 0, no anxiety. 10 is like just about a panic attack, like the worst ever. And so people will come into my anxiety group. I run an anxiety group every Wednesday, and they'll be at 8 or 9, you know? And sometimes they're anxious about being in group because it's talking about anxiety. So I'll be like, just close your eyes. And, you know, we think of like, what is the negative belief you have? And you focus on it and you do your tapping. And when you tap, you wake up the wise part of your brain, and then you can think logically. When we're anxious, we can't think logically. When we're freaking out, there's no logic there. It's just protection. You're just trying to protect yourself. And people who are constantly trying to protect themselves do not connect with others.
Yes.
They're fighting, they're pushing away people because connection for them, with all their childhood adversity, connection meant pain. Connection needs to mean love and security and safety. And so if you can get people to kind of calm down enough to start to have a connection with somebody, That's where where there is resilience. Resilience happens when we have people who are helping us stay afloat. But we can't help anyone stay afloat if they're swimming away, if they're like,
That's true.
danger. So when people have been trained as young children that nobody can be trusted, then they will reject connection, and connection is the key. We are
Yes.
all wired for connection, and that's the best predictor of any recovery of anything is a positive support system. So if you have that positive support system that you're on, you can overcome open heart surgery or diabetes or whatever health things, or mental health. You can overcome addictions. You can overcome alcoholism. You can overcome major depressive disorder. You can work through those things if you have somebody that will help you validate your feelings and be supportive of you.
Isn't that powerful? I mean, this information is so valuable because as you work through it, I mean, there are things that I know and I have learned that I can use on myself, but we all can use these tools. We all can use these tools for ourselves.
Right.
I don't think that there has to have been something horribly significant for us to be able to put these tools in place to still improve the quality
absolutely
of our life.
You don't have to have a 10 ACES score to be able to utilize this. You still get to improve your connections, your relationships, your life quality can all be improved if you understand this stuff more, because then you can connect with people on all kinds of levels. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Very exciting for me because as you know, I'm very passionate about this, and I want everybody to be better and to feel better as you do.
Exactly. Yes.
So this is great that we have the opportunity. So when you're working with, let's say, young people who have a pretty high ACEs score, high being relative, are there some things that you might do, give them some strategies to try to neutralize or
absolutely we do. Because I'm an EMDR certified therapist, I use EMDR a lot, which is that what I just explained, the bilateral stimulation. And so the basics of understanding the brain, the amygdala, the cortisol that goes to the front, the panic hormone goes to the front and shuts your brain down, and just like understanding we are wired that way to protect us from dying. Like that protects the species. We have the fight or flight response to protect us from dying. So it's really important for them to understand, first of all, your responses were natural and normal, but you need to figure out what are those triggers and what are they saying? What is when someone says a certain thing, what belief is that triggering? And so, the basics of cognitive behavioral therapy come into play here, where you have an event and that event triggers a belief, a feeling, and a response. So it's like these little bubbles. And so you have from the event that happens to your reaction is like a 16th of a second.
Wow.
We are very fast. But really what's in there is we go backwards. There was a response because you were feeling what? Because you were believing what about this? And so I did a session with a teenage boy years ago, and I was explaining the basics of cognitive behavioral therapy so that he could learn when you have those, it's like a train of thought, it's like a neural pathway, or it's like a river. You have this thing, the event happens, you believe something, you feel something, it's cause and effect, and it causes that final reaction. But you can always believe something else, and you'd feel something else, and then you'd have a different reaction. So it's like moving the river, which in a physical, actual sense, you can. If you were going to move a little creek, you'd have to have big equipment, and you'd have to move a lot of dirt. And the river it's been flowing that way for a while, it's going to want to keep flowing that way. And our neural pathways are that way. They've been grooved since pre-birth. Like we were learning things in utero. In utero, we were learning language and inflection and flavors and all the things we're learning in utero. So we have been learning all these things all our life. So those pathways, as they start getting in there, are pretty deep. Those grooves are deep. But we have the option of saying, I don't want to believe that anymore. So a lot of Yeah, but it's
Choice.
like you have to, but it feels like it's not a choice because it's been so fast. You have somebody says something, does something, you believe you're not worthy of being loved. You feel sad, which makes you angry, and then then you have an explosion, you know? And so
Yes.
it's like that. And so it's like having to, the first step is to say, here was my reaction. What was I feeling? What was I really feeling? Go underneath all that. What was I really feeling? And a lot of times it's sadness. And then what was I believing? Well, he was disrespecting me. Well, what's underneath that belief? You know, and when you get down to the bottom of it, it's like, I'm not important.
Right.
Or I'm not loved. And our basic psychological need is to feel loved. So if anything is contradictory to that, we have the belief that we're not lovable, whatever, and that goes into sadness, anger, jealousy, whatever, and that causes the reaction. So we understand what the trigger was and what the final response was. So next time, what do you want to believe instead? And so that's where EMDR comes in. We get down to that negative belief, I'm not lovable, or I'm not worthy of love, or I'm not important, or I'm stupid, or whatever this negative belief is. We look at that and I say, how distressing is that belief? Like when you think about, oh my God, I'm so stupid, or, you know, and I have people say that a lot. I'm stupid. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough is a big one.
Right.
And we don't feel good enough if we don't feel loved.
Mm-hmm.
So we look at that, and then we say with EMDR, what do you want to believe instead of I'm not good enough? And they can say something like, they can't usually. They'll say, I don't know, I'm just not good enough. Okay, well, let's go with I'm good enough regardless. Whatever my choices, however much I weigh, whatever education I have, I'm good enough regardless. And so we rate how much they believe that, and we rate how distressed they are about this negative belief. And then we do some BLS, some bilateral stimulation, and just face that terrible nastiness that they've been trying to avoid with alcohol or marijuana or whatever they're trying to cover up this negative belief. And then if you can get the distress level down of that negative belief, then you build up the positive belief. And then there's that one neural pathway when a similar event happens, they might start to, and then they'll stop. Go, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. I was believing I'm not good enough, but I forgot. I've changed that. It takes practice to get a new neural pathway, you know?
So exciting. So exciting.
Yeah.
Well, to know there's relief for so many that suffer.
Yes.
Powerful.
Yeah. So if they can get that distress down, they can let people in too.
So this is really a good solution, the EMDR.
Yes, it's amazing. I'm on my way to becoming a consultant for EMDR. And so like right now I'm a consultant in training. And then when I'm done being a consultant, I hope to be a trainer. That's my next goal. So that will be good. That's like 3 to 5 years down the road. So right now I'm assisting with EMDR trainings for my organization, and then doing consulting for the new EMDR therapists. So, which is super fun because it's so gratifying when clients who have been struggling have like sudden, they're like, oh, I don't have to believe that anymore. It's amazing. Yeah. The angels singing.
The angels are singing. The light bulb goes off. The world changes.
Yes, that.
That's fabulous. Is there anything else about ACEs because I would like to move on to visit with you about polyvagal theory and some things that go along with that.
I think we've covered ACEs. Yeah, because really now what we're talking about really is when you have a fight or flight response.
Yes.
It's a pretty good segue to that. So let me share this other the polyvagal thing. So there's a vagus nerve, the biggest nerve in our bodies. I have this polyvagal, it's like exercises, and so I use that in my study group. So it really is. I'll send you some of my notes from this book. I've been reading it slowly and taking notes on it because it's just so good. But this is one of the things I found. We were in one of our staffings a couple of months ago. Ron, who's our trainer for EMDR, was talking about the polyvagal system. And since I've been learning more about it in the past, like even just 6 months, it's just amazing. So when you look at the vagus nerve, different parts of the vagus nerve are stimulated when things are going on in our lives. So when we are good, we're down here in this bottom, the ventral vagal, we're like grounded. We are in the present. We get to feel joy. We're aware of other people. We're connected. We have compassion. We're mindful of our own stuff. And like physically, then physiologically, digestion's working well. We don't get sick as much. We have a good immune response. We get good rest. We can recuperate from whatever happens. Plus, we have the oxytocin, which is the hormone that stimulates connection with other people. So when the ventral vagal is activated, we are so good. It's like feeling authentic and connected with friends and family, and things are good, right? Then something happens and we kind of, there's this wiggly line here, which indicates a little bit of fear. Okay, no, I'm all right. A little bit of fear. Okay, a little bit of anger. Okay, these kind of things. So that does happen too. That's kind of all that bottom third is the normal thing. We're always going to have fight or flight. If we can work on people having a lower overall level of their subjective unit of distress, SUD, the SUD score, if it's like a 0, 1, or 2 all the time, then they're in that social engagement, they feel safe, and the fight or flight is there just when they need it, like, oh, I'm running late, I got to get moving, or, oh, there is a runaway car, I'm going to get out of the way. But if that is constantly going, then it's like either the scared running away, panic, fear, anxiety, constant worry, like, whoo, gotta move, or fight, like you're going to fight off the aggressor. So it's like if somebody even sounds a little threatening to you, like they may say something that's not kind, which we have a lot of now these days.
Yes.
People have so much permission to be so mean to each other. So there's going to be rage, road rage. Think about that. If somebody cuts you off and you go into a blind rage, like you should not be behind the wheel. So if that happens just a little bit, you're going to kind of have it and then go back down into being okay. If you have a good support system, that's going to, if you have a good sense of who you are, you'll be able to get back into your ventral vagal, and that's okay. But the sympathetic nervous system is activated, and the amygdala, gets activated when there's some sense of fear, of some sense of not being safe. If that is happening all the time, or it's a huge abundance, like many things have gone wrong and you don't feel safe, you are going to jump. You're going to be up into, I say jump, it's not even active at all, freeze, total immobility, hopeless, trapped, curled up in a fetal position, dissociating, numb. So people who have been like in something tragic, like, for example, just this week, at a concert, we had left, but at a concert, a guy fell off a balcony in a big stadium in Indianapolis. And somebody I know was there, and I did some EMDR with her to help, and I explained this to her, that because she was feeling bad that she didn't help, but she didn't know what the paramedics needed to help. But she was completely in the freeze trauma response, and then she did freeze, and then she was out. She was like, I gotta go. She wanted out of there so bad. I said, those are both very natural responses, because your body, your brain has gotten all that cortisol and adrenaline. You're not thinking logically anymore. You're just trying to protect yourself. But when you meet people who are super depressed, who are just, they don't care anymore, that's because they're in that dorsal vagal. They are shut down. So when you look at fight or flight, the sympathetic, the blood pressure goes up, the heart rate goes up, the fuel availability, you got to eat more because you're expending, there's a lot of adrenaline. You have more blood clotting, your pupil size gets increases. So like there's less fuel storage, there's less insulin activity. Think about that, how much stress can affect people with diabetes. Digestion is a problem. You can't relate to people, your relationship, because you're either running away or you're angry. Neither one of those are good for connection. So, and then when you're in this freeze, it's like your heart rate decreases, your blood pressure. It's like, look here, it says preparation for death. You're just like, there's nothing, and so my mom would call that apoplectic, just, just shut down. So it's just, you don't even notice pain as much because the endorphins kind of numb the pain. So lots of things going on there. You're not having eye contact. You're decreased muscle tone. You're just limp. You just are. So when we meet people in this situation, man, we've got our work cut out for us. But if they can understand, this is just part of the trauma response. If they can we start to build rapport and that's why a lot of times when I meet people, our first session is just instilling hope. Just instill hope. We can help you. I'm so glad you're here. You've done so well so far. You got yourself here. You're sitting in the office now. Anything to inject some hope in there to bring them down into maybe just the sympathetic nervous system is activated. They're still a little jumpy, but when we do EMDR in the first session, just being able to calm everything down is amazing. And there's this idea of mirroring neurons. And so that is when, if you have a calm, low voice, you can it's going to be okay. Take a deep breath. You're going to be all right. And people that goes into their brain. They're taking in that information. They're going, okay, if she can be calm, I can be calm. If he can be, I had a client one time, the grandmother called me and this kid, older teenager, was freaking out, screaming, crying. He was so upset. And she said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I said, give him the phone. So she's like, he won't talk to me. I said, I don't care. Give him the phone. So she gave him the phone. And I said, hey, take a deep breath. You're safe now. What's going on? And so I said, take another deep breath, and he really calmed down. Just me saying, calm down. We forget to breathe.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
So I said, take a deep breath. And I reminded him that he was currently safe. Turns out before he lived with his grandparents, his mom had left him places, forgot about him. And the grandpa had just said right before, come on, we got to go. If you don't go, I'm going to leave you. Boom.
Wow.
So this is something that we talked about in our next session. And I'm like, Grandpa, you can't say that anymore. Don't, and it's not, so, and he was, like maybe 17 going on 10 or 11. He was, he was just a little slower. He just wasn't quite getting it all. But we all understood that, and because when I asked him, I said, people leave you behind before? Because I really expected him to say, well, no, because I figured it was just an irrational fear. Oh, yeah. I got left at a gas station. I got left at, and it's just like, okay, that makes sense that you would have that big of a response because that would trigger that old memory and that old neural pathway, because that's what that means.
So once again, you're chasing it back to see, why did I respond like that? Why was my response so strong? And those of us who know how to do these things for ourselves, use the tools all the time. And I think probably with time we use them and we don't even realize what we're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just like with me talking to that kid on the phone, I was just trying to calm him down. I think I was using my parenting skills. Like, it's okay. Take a deep breath. And in hindsight, it was like crazy perfect because he just needed to know he was safe. It was just, it's amazing. And the grandma, when she got the phone back, she goes, what did you do? He was I'm like, well, I just told him he was safe, take a deep breath. Because remember too, when the amygdala activates the cortisol, this whole part of the brain gets less blood flow. And so less oxygen is going to the brain. So if you can take deep breaths, deep conscious breaths, you will oxygenate the blood again and start being able to think a little clearer. That's been something we've done for decades. Take 10 breaths, and I would say to my kids, count to 10 cookies, or, just give them a second to just kind of breathe. So it does, when you breathe in really consciously, you oxygenate the brain again, because the brain has had the blood flow diminished because the body is ready to die. So, and all this is going on. The sympathetic nervous system just moves, does these things. And we only can really activate our own thoughts and then go, wait a minute. This is a false alarm. I'm going to be okay. Take a deep breath, So So pretty
There,
cool. It's pretty exciting
it
stuff.
is, it is fabulous and amazing. The hope is there is so much, there is so much that can be done, retraining that brain
Mm-hmm.
and reprogramming ourselves
Yep.
to become who I believe we're really supposed to be. We're not supposed to be trapped. We're not supposed to be caught up. We're not supposed to not breathe. We're not supposed to do all these things.
Right.
So let's clear this so that we can become into our wholeness and our fullness. And there is
Oh,
hope.
and that's the top of the Maslow is, authenticity and becoming oneself, becoming our true selves. That's the point. That's the pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy, whereas you think about the bottom is food and shelter,
Right. Right.
and that's not even
Safety.
including safety is like up on the Maslow's, it's like, yeah. So just being able to kind of like, no, this is who I am in my core. I know I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the most spectacular gift I think any human could have, to just know I'm okay. No matter what's happening.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And more importantly, thank you for all that you have done for all the clients that have had those life-changing, empowering experiences by becoming more whole
Right.
with the
Right.
tools that you have given them. I admire you so, so much. And I thank you for your time. I'm just in awe of everything I've learned, and it kind of tickles me because I use a lot of these things on myself. So because I know it,
Yep.
and these
So
are tools.
think about when we're comforting a baby, we're doing
Yes,
bilateral
yes.
stimulation. We're going back to, yeah.
Or humming,
Mm-hmm.
rocking, humming, singing, all those things.
Good. Yeah. Healing.
Healing. And that's what we love.
Yes. Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me here today, too.
I appreciate you so much.
All right.
Looking forward to talking to you again.
Okay. Thank you, Bam.
Bye-bye.